When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, folks. Mark Ledlow here with the Fearless Mindset Podcast. And Mike Trott reached out to me, and Mike Trott, I keep on calling you Trout. It's Trott. He is not a fish. He is Michael Trott. And so he was kind to reach out to me, and he wanted to celebrate our 100th episode in the show, and kind of celebrate that and the fact that he was my first guest. And I was probably a nervous wreck. I remember sweating in the studio trying to figure out what the heck I was doing on my first show. And, Michael is just gracious, and we worked together in the past, and he just wanted to be a part of something. And as he called himself, the guinea pig. And that guinea pig experience turned into I think we're almost at 12,000 downloads already within a year and a half, which is pretty crazy to me. And I just want to thank the guest, Mike, for coming on, and many other guests have been on the show, and just thanks to the audience. I'm hoping we add value to you guys, and hope you're learning something from all these great subject matter experts like Michael here. And wow, hard to believe, almost 12,000 and 2 years later. So thanks for offering to come over. You reached out in a text. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Let's do the year anniversary on this thing, or 2-year anniversary for that matter. And pretty wild.
Congratulations to you, Mark. I was surprised, as we were talking a minute ago, that it's been 2 years. I thought it had been a year. And I saw your most recent number coming up of 100 podcasts. I'm like, holy cow, that's we did do the first one together, but congratulations to you. That's pushing yourself outside the box. And I think anybody who puts himself out there, especially in a podcast, you're opening yourself up for all kinds of as haters and people to make comments. But good for you to take that step and to push yourself out there a little bit. Have to give you a little explanation.
Sure.
I am sitting in a room that's about 400 years old in a Scottish hunting cottage. So the Wi-Fi is not the best, and the sound's probably not the best, but that would explain the room I'm in and the deer head behind me. So anyway, good to see you again.
You too. Is it like late at night over there, like 10 o'clock or something like that?
We're at 6:10.
Okay, not too bad.
But right now it doesn't get dark till about 11 o'clock. So it's daylight when I go to bed, that's for sure. Wow.
So you're over there for business, travel, leisure?
A little of both.
Okay.
Company I work for, we have a couple projects in Europe, one in Portugal, which I was at last week, and now jumping over here to Scotland in the Highlands. We have another project here, henceforth the cap. Scotland's a great place to be. Great weather right now. You have the St. Andrews Open is going on right now, so you have a lot of Americans in Europe right now as well. Good to be back in Europe and good to be back in Scotland.
Now, for the audience that doesn't know Michael, he works for Discoveryland. He's the head of security for Discoveryland, reports to the CEO. He's been at that role for a long, long time, traveled the world to many places. After the hurricane, you're over there in the Caribbean doing stuff, or you're your boss. And you've been there. How many years have you been in that position now?
Well, about 7 years in total. I took a leave of absence, if you will, and did some other things for a couple of years, and I came back. So about 7 years in total, 5.5 years this time around. But I will be making a transition later this year, and I've already hired my replacement.
Oh, wow.
And another veteran that I'm glad to announce. He is in Europe with me right now doing his thing, but we'll do a little bit of a pass off and make sure that he's got the reins, and he will take over by the end of this year. But nope, it's been a good ride, that's for sure.
Congratulations. So you're wrapping up this year, then you're on to a new chapter, new experience.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next. There could be some involvement with Discovery Land Company with some other projects. But as you and I were mentioned before we came online, I'm getting ready to kick off with another project with 3 other veterans, 4 of us together. I can't get into details right now. It's a little bit OPSEC in the sense that we're just not ready to talk much about it publicly. But it's a departure from what any of us have done as veterans. It's in a new space that we're excited about. It's a space that's going to allow us to pay honor and tribute to other individuals and veterans over something that is very unique and very special to us. But more to come in the future. Hopefully later this year, we'll launch next year. But it's kind of exciting. And I'm knocking on the door of 60 next year.
60?
And, 60. It's hard to believe, I know, right?
Holy smokes. You look so much younger than that.
Thank you. But for somebody who's been doing the same thing for 40 years, you know, in the security industry, in the military, in the agency, it's nice to do something different for a while. And, you know, just like you did with the podcast a couple of years ago, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, doing something different. So we're looking forward to that. Very much so.
New challenges. Now that you look back at your career, you know, you spent the time with the CIA, you're protecting George Tenet on that team globally, did that for many years. And then you went to the private sector with Discovery Land. And what was the biggest, the most experience you got with the journey? What are your big takeaways that really added value to you?
I think, Mark, I was fortunate to leave the military after 10 years and make that transition to the CIA. That was a softer, easier transition, if you can imagine. You know, we were still part of a sort of a military or government structure, if you would. Even if you had the paramilitary or the special activities divisions or the close protection, the team I was on, there were probably half of us were former military. So it was an easy transition. And then when I transitioned from the CIA to a corporation, the Dell Corporation, I was still part of individuals who were former military. And as a corporation, you're still government-like. So the difficulty to make that transition wasn't as hard. And then making a transition to private sector, working for high net worth families or smaller businesses, again, came easy because I'd made all those other transitions. But for sure, if I'd gone straight from the military to private sector or a private family, I would have been the typical bull in a china shop, I think. So I had a softer landing and a softer transition. So, I'm very blessed in that particular, the way those things happened for me to have those transitions. I was very fortunate. So I think for me, the thing that I recall the most is taking something from me from where I left to where I'm going to, and being able to try to find a way to make that work at the new location. And now that I've got those 40 years under my belt, it's easier to look back and go, I shouldn't have tried so hard to take certain things with me and leave that and try to adapt to a new way. And I think that is something I've learned through all these different transitions. And through really all the different travels of the world, you have to leave a part of you behind and be part of the entity where you're going and learn that new way. And I think that's probably the most exciting part of the transitioning, whether it's in life or whether it's in your businesses or whether it's in the EP system or the world, how we transition from team to team to team. We can always bring something with us, but sometimes it's best to leave certain things behind and and adapt to a new way of doing things. And looking back now after 40 years, I can see where I tripped a lot, and then I can see where I've made those transitions a little smoother by maybe age, a little more maturity, and learning along the way with good mentors above me helping me out as well.
You said a key thing there, mentors. I mean, I've had so many mentors. You're one of them in the industry. I've made my mistakes. I've done some stupid things while working in the industry that I'm not proud of, but I had to have those experiences to grow. And I think as the new generation comes into the executive protection industry, what do you see as you could give them advice? One couple things of advice you could give the younger generation breaking in the executive protection industry for a career. What would your advice be to those folks?
I think being open-minded, not afraid to try new things. Our industry has grown so fast over the last, 30, 40 years. our skill sets have changed. We're seeing so much technology play a role in the last, let's call it a couple of decades, especially even the last decade. I was just talking to some people about the security and the infrastructure, our practice around executive protection with vehicles, just as an example. There's so much technology in vehicles today that the average person, even the EP person, doesn't understand all those risk factors with a vehicle when it comes to that technology. That is just a rolling Wi-Fi machine that has a lot of antennas, if you will, where people can take advantage of that. The typical EP person doesn't understand those risks, and we have to now either become specialists or we have to bring specialists to that team. I remember being at a CIA event where we were talking about the last 50 years in close protection in the CIA. And at this event, we had a gentleman who was probably in his mid-80s. He had been part of the first team in the late 1950s. And it was a panel, and we had almost every generation on this panel across. And it was interesting to hear this gentleman speak about, when he first started doing protection, he had a 38 with a reloader and an ink pen and maybe a flashlight. And it was a big flashlight at that. And then looking across the stage, so the guys are sitting with multiple weapon systems, armored vehicles, technical security countermeasure equipment, communication equipment, just all the different, evolution of security technology and equipment. And now we're at a point now where the typical team has a lot of specialists on that team, a lot of individuals that have certain skill sets that maybe not everybody has. So I think, one of the things I would recommend is try to find where your comfort level and where you're really good at. Sometimes it is the hard skill guys and gals where we're a little more aggressive. And you want those kind of individuals on the front of the line that's ready to react quickly. As we just saw with the recent, assassination with the former prime minister of Japan, that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. And, I'm not going to second guess the individuals on that detail, but there was a lot of missed opportunities of what was happening and what was going to happen visually, that their response wasn't probably appropriate. And I think sometimes there's people that do that well, and there's some people that maybe are better at drivers, or they're better at logistics, or they're better at the intelligence aspect. So find that spot in this organization we call it executive protection, which has really gotten much, much bigger, and find that spot you do well in. And that may mean you move around from different positions to different positions, but it could be surveillance or counter surveillance. It could be the self-defense or the instructing. It could be the weapons systems. Not everybody is experienced across the entire board. Most people are not. So find that sweet spot to you, and at the end of the day, find something that makes you happy. You want to enjoy what you're doing. If it's not fun, then why are you doing it?
Why be miserable? Good point. We had a good forecast about what would happen after pandemic. We did that other episode, like what's going to look like after COVID-19 hits us. Do you think we were pretty accurate in that conversation on the post-pandemic? Now that we have all these new variances and stuff, what does it look like out there? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of security companies are slashing budgets. A lot of people losing positions now because of the inflation thing, and I'm like, that doesn't sound too good for people looking for jobs out there. I just wasn't sure what you're hearing at your level.
I think it's still working itself out. You would like to think a year ago we were at the end of this, but look at the number of companies that haven't really returned back to work yet. We're just not there yet. I mean, like right now, traveling internationally, you wouldn't even know that there was a pandemic a year or 2 years ago. Everybody's really enjoying themselves. But to your point, hopefully there's no more variants that lock us back down again, and this just becomes another element of the flu that we deal with each year, and it's business as usual. But I think, COVID definitely was a business disruptor in the sense that it challenged a lot of companies to to reorganize and to work remotely, as an example, or do things differently. I don't think we're at 100% return yet. You know, the company I work for, we're back to kind of normal, I believe. And what we do as a business is back to normal for sure. But I don't think the world is quite there yet. And because security services provide, you know, whether it's special events or it's physical security, I do think global travel has picked up back up again. And so you're seeing a lot of principals travel more. And, you know, medical components has taken a new, as it should, it's taken a higher interest in a lot of EP teams to have that medical component, whether it's testing for COVID or, you know, if you did pick up COVID, do you have the right medicines with you and the right people to help you through that? So you're seeing more of a medical element to executive protection than you did a few years ago, which I think is a good thing. It's, you know, we should have more of that medical component part of our teams. But I don't know, Mark. I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think we're back to normal just yet. And I think everybody's, you know, we're stepping on ice. We're carefully walking. You're still seeing if somebody sneezes, you know, everybody takes a step away from them.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet, but we are getting close. Hopefully we get through this winter months and we don't have a big negative return of COVID, and we don't have high hospitalizations. That's what's going to slow things down again. If we keep the hospitalizations down, I think we get through the end of this year, we'll be back to normal, maybe early next year.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the C-suite are moving around quite a bit, jetting around. I know a couple guys on a couple different teams that they're just busy. They're just they're moving and grooving, and they're getting busier as we speak. How's the book doing?
Yeah, the book has done well. It's been out for 3 years. Thanks for asking. That's another one. It seems like it's hard to believe it's been 3 years. We've had two cycles of printing. I don't know that we'll do a third. You know, because the book has its audience. Its audience are people who are specifically interested in close protection. Will I do a third print? Probably not. I don't know that would. We'll see. We'll see what happens. If there's a demand for it, I would. But it's done well, and I think, you know, knock on wood, it's something that may be around for a while. It's always encouraging and humbling when I get an email or a message from someone who just read the book, even though it's been out 3 years, and it resonates with them today. And I think that was part of the intent of writing it, is that it's a kind of book that would be relevant 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and not try to put myself in a box of a couple of years. So thanks for asking. It's still doing well. And hopefully it'll be something I'm still able to talk about 5 or 10 years from now, because the topics in it, to me, most of the topics are timeless. It's not based on any particular decade, if you will.
Out of that journey, when you wrote that book, what was probably your favorite experience that you wrote about? I know I was in one of those experiences in Beverly Hills with you. That's where Mike and I actually met.
Some would try to forget. Some would try to forget, right?
But I saw Mike in action for a summer, and you know, it was probably the most well-rounded detail I've ever worked on. But of course, Mike was in the leadership position, so I was blessed to be under your leadership and Bill Hacknesson. Was it Hacknesson leadership?
Hacknesson, yep.
Yep, and it was just it was crazy. I think there was probably over 100 people that were fired off that thing in less than 2 months, and it was like, wow, this is real life EP stuff and stateside stuff. But yeah, for people that don't know what book we're talking about, it's called The Protected, that Michael wrote, and talks about his days in the CIA, the Air Force, and the private sector. And once in a while you'll see somebody take a picture of it at the airport and post it on LinkedIn and tag Mike on it on LinkedIn, and it's like, all right, another reader, another Amazon subscriber. And so congratulations on that. That was pretty cool to see you do that and accomplish that. And I still haven't wrote my book. It's just I have too many other projects to do. And what's your advice? I mean, you see EP evolve right now, and you're seeing all these schools evolve, because when you have all these schools, people have enough time to go to these schools. It tells me if we're that busy, people wouldn't have time to go to these schools. And is there advice you give these instructors out there that they could do things better? We could do better as an organization in the industry to sharpen each other's axes to be better professionals out there.
That's a good question too, Mark, because there are a lot of schools. And while the concepts and principles of executive protection are pretty consistent, I do find that, keeping it real, try not to make it too high speed. I think when you break down an elementary course, it's important to focus on the fundamentals and not forget those. Sometimes some schools some instructors try to make it too high speed. I think that's where you break out and you have different courses. There's not a one course fits all, because if you're new in the industry, you need to stick to the fundamentals. You need to learn those first before you get in and start doing really advanced training. So I think it's important that schools understand who their audience is. Just like us in basic training. You went through basic training. You didn't. If you come out of the special forces or any of the special teams, you didn't start there. You started basic training. So part of I think was a lot of courses are trying to outdo one another. So they're putting up some high speed videos, some conversations, some course curriculum. And as long as those individuals that are attending that course have already got the fundamentals and they're ready for that advanced course, great. But if you're trying to bring somebody new into it and you're starting at that mid to high level, I think that's inappropriate. So I think it's about developing a course and making sure that your class and your audience is the appropriate class for that. It's a building block. We start at the basic and we keep moving up. And I think the other interesting thing is to get more international people into your courses. The one thing I find when I go, whether it's in Asia or Europe or South America, Latin America, I always learn something. Even at 40 years, I always pick up a new skill, a different way to approach it, a different perspective. And I think anytime you bring in international students, you have a better class, you have a better course. Sometimes there's a little bit of a language barrier. Sometimes there's a little bit of cultural. If you've been in this business for longer than a couple of decades, no matter who you are, you're going to be making foreign trips. And when you operate as an American in Europe or Asia or Latin America, we do bring with us that consistent concepts and principles, but there's also the way that they do things culturally. And it's just something to be aware of. I think it makes us a better, well-rounded, close protection agent when we have gone through courses with other international students. So that's something else I would try to entice schools to have more of an international flair.
Good advice. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff on LinkedIn lately and a lot of stuff on Facebook. And I'm like, okay, this is almost like a Hollywood, short for a new movie coming out. But hey, to each their own. They're giving what their audience wants. I get it. And you mentioned something too before we did this about talking about collaboration overseas and what your envision of that looks like. Just working together with different security companies that offer security services overseas. I know I've been hearing from different sources. I'm not going to name who the organizations are, but they're saying they're really having a tough time finding support overseas, especially transportation support services. I'm not sure if there's a way to get everybody on the same page because you're dealing with different countries, different budgets, different skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been one of the struggles. And that's why even, the teams I have worked in the past, we would come back from a foreign trip, we would make a post-trip report, and we would write detailed report about our drivers and our other local agents and the positives and the negatives. And, sometimes you have to make a change with the personnel or even a company when you're traveling like that. But you just mentioned a minute ago, we were in LA many years ago, we had to do the same thing in the US. We had to basically let a bunch of people go and bring in some other individuals. So, I don't think it's a matter of no matter where you are, I think if you are operating overseas, as a U.S. base, or if you're a European team, or you're an Asian team and you're coming to the U.S. as an example, you still have your standards that you still want to conduct your protection to the way that you have your principles that are used to. And if you're a risk-based program, you may bring certain risk with you, or you may enter into activities that it's a different kind of risk for your principles. So you have to still bring your program with you, just as we do when we travel overseas. So I think it's a matter of really getting out there and having these conversations that you and I probably could probably talk about 5, 6, 7 different international companies that are the ones that we're used to working with, and we do things in a similar way. And that's important for us to be able to be consistent, not only to protect our principals, but to make sure that our principals, at the end of the day, our job is to make sure principals are enjoying themselves, enjoying their trips, or are successful in whatever business venture they're into. So not to cause a lot of confusion for them. So to be able to be consistent. So we're always, Mark, as you mentioned, we're always looking for individuals overseas that are similar, are like-minded. And I think that's one of the cool things we've seen in the last couple of decades, because of all the, I'm not going to throw in necessarily our wars and conflicts, but we have seen a lot of international soldiers, if you will, and contractors working together over the last couple of decades. And that, between the international market opening up in the last 2 or 3 decades, there's a thin line between the way maybe we provide protection in the U.S. versus a European or Asian or Latin America. We're all very similar today. So I think it's definitely much easier to find people that can support you in the way that you're used to doing business versus, let's go back 4 decades ago. It was hard to find. It was hard to find individuals that were similarly trained. Thankfully, we've come a long way, and we're a lot closer. We do things a lot more similar than we used to. So that's a good thing about it.
Definitely.